Welcome. Hopefully, week one, day one went well, and that you're making your way through the assigned reading, and that you are enjoying the text. And I wanted to come and talk with you a little bit about chapter 2 within the parameters of what it is that you're reading in the family. Chapter 2, the authors talk about the family and they discuss it. They discuss the family as a developing biosystem, and they look at that and they articulate that through family systems theory. And family systems theory can be broken down into three subcategories, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But in this, I'm going to lay some groundwork, and then I'm going to give you a case study at the very end. And hopefully that case study is going to give you the opportunity to start thinking about how would you help individuals, knowing that a lot of y'all are already out in the field, and those of y'all that aren't, that is your desire, that is your passion, that is your conviction, and that you want to go out and help those individuals because you have a heart to help, whether that's in ministry, whether that's in counseling, or if that's impacting your family. And so you can see how family systems impacts just about everything that we do. And so if we can turn to page 23 and actually look at figure 3, what you'll see is how the input from the environment affects the family system as a whole. It affects the subsystem of the parental subsystem, and it affects the sibling subsystem. And so that input has the opportunity of affecting all the different dynamics at whole. And so think about it like this: every interaction has the opportunity of affecting your family. It can affect it in a positive manner, or it can affect it in a negative manner. So think about it as if Billy, the son of Ann and Sam, gets in trouble at school. Well, who does that directly affect? Well, it directly affects Billy in the moment. But eventually Billy's going to make his way home, and all that Billy carries with him has the opportunity of directly affecting whom? Well, Ann and Sam, right? And so that's the reason why you've probably heard the illustration of kick the dog or kick the cat, right? Which is displacement, a psychological dynamic of one of Freud's work. And so what did the cat or dog do? Well, nothing probably, but in that illustration, the individual that was frustrated because of something that took place at work or school, and those frustrations finally got the better of him or her, and by the time that they got home, they took it out on the first person that they saw, which was their cat. Well, again, we have the opportunity of directly affecting those closest to us by what happens to us, thus that input. And so, let's look a little bit. Let's look at this. And so, if we look at Scripture, what does Scripture say about this? And now, of course, in chapter 1 of the family, we understand that we need to look at Scripture not only in content, but also context, so that we don't do like what the authors say, we strip mine and utilize it to justify our means, right? And that's one of the reasons why I love the Scripture, John 1:1, right? The word, the written word, content, and the stature of Jesus, context, they both point to one another. And so content and content without context can breed confusion, has the opportunity of doing that. So let's look at this scripture in Exodus 34:7, where it says this: keeping mercy for thousands, forgiven iniquity and transgression of sin, and that by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, and upon the children's children unto the third and fourth generation. Now, again, if we were going to read that in total context, we probably would have read a couple of scriptures prior to chapter 7, or verse 7, and a couple after that, right? And in total context, we'd have read the whole passage. But let's just take that little snapshot of that scripture, Exodus 34:7, and let's look at it through the lenses of context now that we have read the content. And if we look at that scripture through the lenses of early Jewish families, we understand that those families typically had the third and fourth generations living with them. Which brings us to a psychological debate, if you will, nature versus nurture. Do the things that we do they happen, are they expressed out of this biological nature, or out of family interactions, or the lack thereof? If the third and fourth generation lived in the family household, then they observed and possibly were conditioned, if you allow me to say it that way, and expressed themselves in certain ways. But on the flip side of that, is a lot of research coming out about cellular memories and all the billions of cells that make up the body, and the storage of that, and how they get passed through the chromosomes through parents to children. So which is it? Is it nature? Is it nurture? And the answer is yes. And so if you have done some studying on this psychological debate, you have seen that the vast majority of people in the field of psychology have come to the understanding that yes, there is a correlation between both. But to what degree? How much? And the interesting thing about that sub-question is it typically takes us back to the original debate. And if you hear somebody talk about the nature and how things that we do and behave are stemmed out of the nature, you can probably see it from that dynamic. But on the flip side, if you hear somebody talk about the nurture, that makes a pretty good argument as well. And so, which is it? Is it nature or is it nurture? And to my belief, yes, it's both. But to what degree again? And so, if this is the question, then what's the answer? But the great thing is that you get to answer that question. That you get to come to the understanding of what is it that is your conviction. How do you interpret the scripture that you read, thus context to the content, so that you have a revelation, so that as you're sitting across from individuals, helping them process the reality, showing them what is, so that they get to decide, do I want to continue to stay there and keep that, or do I want to move to a place of health? You get to decide that, right? But the great thing is, regardless of the answer, or the question, we as believers have an understanding that we know the answer. The answer is still the same. It's the relationship with Jesus. It's the intimacy. It's his light and his word. So let's take a deeper look at the family system and these three categories that I talked about a little bit earlier. And so the three categories that family systems typically fall into are structural, strategic, and intergenerational. And so as you look at the case study that I'm going to give here in a little bit, I want you to take each one of these categories of family systems and apply it to the case study. How would you help the individual sitting across from you in that hypothetical case study? How would you minister to them? How would you counsel them? How would you help them process the reality so that they could choose health, right? So according to Tan in his book of Counseling and Psychotherapy, A Christian Perspective, this is how he communicates structural family therapy. It says it focuses on the organization of the families and the rules that govern the interaction between family members. Attention is given to the family roles, alignments, and how the family overall is composed in terms of its subsystems and boundaries. Okay? Therapists that utilize this form of therapy attempt to help families free themselves from the rigid patterns and thinking of interactions so that they can engage in more constructive and healthy reorganization of the family. And so that is the structural family therapy category. And so again, how would you help the individual in the case study? How would you minister to them out of a structural standpoint? So let's look at strategic. Strategic is a problem-solving therapy that involves the use of creative strategies by the family therapist to reduce or eliminate an unwanted behavior in the family. Haley, who created this structure, Haley's approach does not focus on helping family members gain insight into their past or unconscious process. Instead, it focuses on the presenting problem of the family and on attempting to solve them in a creative and constructive way. Again, how would you minister to the individual within the case study based upon the strategic standpoint? And then the third one is this intergenerational family standpoint, which acknowledges generational influences on the family and individual behavior. Identifying multi-generational behavior and patterns such as management of anxiety can help people see their current problems may be rooted in previous generations. Murray Bowen, who you're going to come to know if you've already taken your counseling theories class, you probably have already heard that name. Within the area of family and marriage, especially in the areas of marriage, you're going to hear the name Murray Bowen quite significantly. So Bowen designed this approach to using within family therapy for treatment for individuals and couples and families. Bowen employed techniques such as normalizing a family's challenges by discussing similar scenarios in other families, describing reactions of individual family members instead of acting them out, and encouraging families to respond with I statements rather than accusatory statements. And I think that that's a beautiful way of being able to help individual is not using accusatory statements, because if they're sitting across from you whether in counseling, whether in ministry, typically they're feeling one of those primary emotions of pain and or fear, right? If not both. And so helping them own it allows them to deconstruct any opportunity of becoming a victim to their environment, right? And so understanding this input has the opportunity of affecting not only ourselves in the dynamic within our family, but we go back into those interactions and we have the opportunity of impacting anybody and everybody around it. I love what Danny Silk says in one of his teachings. He utilizes this, and I think it gives context to what it is that we're talking about. He says this: everybody that you love is in one room. They're all wearing white walls, white carpet. You come in wearing white as well. You're carrying a 5 gallon plastic bucket of red paint. You hold it, you go to the middle of the room, you hold it about shoulder length, and you drop it. Who does red paint get on? Everybody, right? So the question isn't who does the paint get on. The bigger question is, what does that red paint represent? Again, going back to that, it could represent the great things, it could represent positive things, or it can represent terrible things, right? We have the opportunity as we walk into our family dynamics, those that we're closest to carry in that bucket of red paint and dropping it. And so if that red paint represents blessings, affirmations, those type of things, great. But if it has the opportunity of expressing detriment, all kinds of other things that deal with that, then it's going to directly affect those closest to us in a negative formation and format. And so those are a summary of the 3 categories that fall within family systems. And so as you're reading through chapter 2 and listening to this teaching, hopefully that gives you further context of being able to take what the authors have communicate and be able to apply it to the individuals that you'll be interacting with, either in the here and now or in the future. So here's the case study. David, a wealthy young man that comes from royalty and authority, uses his power to seduce a young woman, Bathsheba, who is married. The young woman becomes pregnant due to an affair with David. David once again uses his authority to have Bathsheba's husband killed in battle. Bathsheba becomes pregnant and comes to see you to help her process everything and determine how to move forward. Okay, so how would you minister to Bathsheba? How would you counsel her based upon the 3 subcategories of family system: the structural family therapy, the strategic family therapy, and the intergenerational family therapy? How would you minister to Bathsheba? And really thinking through that and applying that. Again, this is not for a grade. This is not something for you to post a blackboard or a discussion board. This is just for you to be able to process as you're reading through the material of how do I tangibly and practically apply what it is that I'm learning to the individuals that I'm going to be meeting with. And hopefully that working through the process of a case study can be benefit to you as you are learning the material. So I look forward to, again, reading your case studies, getting to hear from you in the discussion boards, coming to you from these web teachings, and looking forward to getting to know you a little bit better through in Blackboard. So thank you so much. You have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.